Hi there, welcome to the Move Me podcast with me, Julie Reynolds. Now, I've been working in the radio biz over the last decade and a bit at the ABC, Triple M, Mix 102.3 and 5AA in Adelaide. And now it's time to do my thing. And as music and talk is my thing, I'm bringing the stories behind the songs that make you move and the stories surrounding the song and the musician that will move you in this brand new podcast. Join me weekly as I breathe a little life into some of my favourite interviews people have asked me about with the artists we know and love. Plus, I'll bring you something new when I check in and see what they're up to now. A happy little mishmash of great stories, good times and groovy music. Today, it's a blast from the past from a couple of years back with the huge talent that is Diesel. We dig a little deep and find out how close Australia was to not have him as one of our legendary music acts over the last 30-odd years. You'll never find Mark Lizotte, Diesel, very far away from a gorgeous guitar. So when he came in 2018 and bought one with him, first thing to do was check out which one it was.
It's a Gretsch, and it's actually quite new, 5 years old now, which, you know, how that's, in my mind, that's quite new. And then you realise, oh man, it's like, 5, 6, 7 years old.
Do you have a guitar room or an annex on the house?
I've got a studio, so that's a guitar room, which is kind of nice because for years I've sort of had, well, when I lived in New York, for instance, I had gear in Australia and I had gear there, and I sort of lamented over pieces that I left behind and blah, blah, blah. But I've been able to, like, now I've got a recording studio, so it's a good excuse to put all my gear in one place.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the ultimate sort of box of crayons.
You did that tour, 7 Axes, and you took 7 of those beautiful guitars on the road. It must have been really difficult to pick, I don't know, were they 7 favourites or were they just 7 songs that worked for what you were doing? Yeah,
that was the whole idea of it, was to kind of pin the guitar to the song or to a specific genre that I was farming for that period or whatever. So the guitars kind of brought out the story. But since then, that kind of set the bar really high. So actually since that tour, I've been travelling like with no less than 7 guitars all the time now. So it's kind of spoilt myself. Half the reason why I can take 7 with me all the time is that I do fly, like jump all over the place. So I figured out how I can get 7 all in one sort of, like it looks like a double sort of golf bag. It's just a really good way of kind of getting everything that I want around without, compromising, because it all has to be under 32 kilograms for any person that takes anything on a plane. It's not about, if you want to take more, you can pay for more. That's the law. It's that no one's going to lift anything more than 32. And I totally understand that, because having 2 pieces myself that I kind of have to wrangle around, my chiropractor loves me. So, I wouldn't want to be a baggage handler dealing with more than 32
It's like
kilos.
this, it's Monday. Mark Lizotte should be arriving in about half an hour's time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. It's all wrong. Like most of the stuff I do to myself, it's kind of a bit like what dancers do, I suppose.
You do move around a lot. You do.
I jump around like a madman.
You do. I've sat at a table before, and the waitresses
I've destroyed a few tables.
Well, the waitresses came and they cleared the table off, and it was like, what's happening now?
Yeah.
Suddenly.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that just kind of fortuitous, or was there some kind of knowledge?
I think, well, who knows? Maybe you'd been there a couple of nights in a row.
Right.
And they knew,
it's going to be that table.
They figured that this middle table here is going to be the easiest one. We'll just get rid of a few drinks.
My brother was known to, when he had 3 venues going, the Lizotte's venues, he had one venue, DY I think it was, and he kind of got to know I played it so many times, and he kind of got to know my idiosyncrasies, and he was like, okay, I'm going to strengthen that table there. I'm going to like double legs.
That's the jumpy table.
Yeah. Going to like make that more robust for him. But of course I wouldn't go to that table. I'd go to the other one. If I see something, I want to, it's like, oh, there's a box and there's a gap. I want to jump that gap and get onto that box. It's just the way I am. I think they call it parkour. I've seen videos of that stuff and it makes me wince. Ouch, ouch. And then I think, hang on, I do that when I'm with a guitar.
Well, I suppose if you've got an audience jumping around, it's hard for you not to.
Audiences they're a performance in themselves, I think. And I say that because my first I remember feeling kind of sized crowds like that was when I toured with Jimmy on the Freight Train Heart tour in 87/88. And I remember Jimmy coming off stage a few times and saying, and it was kind of strange when I first heard it. I was like, what does he mean, But he'd say, like, the audience were, like, better than us tonight. And I guess what he was saying was, sometimes, I mean, we were, I don't think we were ever terrible by any means, but sometimes the audience were just on another level. There's the one factor that just blows my mind is that which other countries went to plastic cups long before that, but in Australia, glass. So at the end of the night, there would just be just an ocean of broken glass over the whole dance floor and spreading back all the way to the mixing desk. So someone would be cleaning that up, but the crew who had to get the gear through all of that, cables, big fat multi-core cables that ran through with gaffer tape, and you got to pull it all up. You're basically building a whole building sort of thing and then tearing it all down, and you have to do it all through broken glass. So inevitably there would always be blood. There was every night someone's going to get cut.
You love a tour, don't you? What's the attraction of maybe a smaller gig?
I love all of the aspects of. I'm struggling to say which one I like best because I'd probably prefer outdoor to indoor when it's a big kind of concert sort of thing. But I find some of the stadiums that I've played, like the arenas, I should say, they're the hardest for me to kind of connect. I don't know what it is, but it just seems like this big void, You can see people, but you can't. But outdoors seems to just feel more natural or something.
Yeah.
And there's also all that oxygen you can suck and it really, I really feel that difference.
And you're quite comfortable touring, aren't you? Do you think that it's because, your family came from America to Australia? You're used to packing up and going and doing something, quite used to it from a young age.
True. We packed up a lot and moved. By the time I started being, transient myself, I think we'd done it 5 times. So, 4 different schools. It does have its impact. I've spoken to a few people about that sort of stuff, and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's pretty serious on a kid."
Well, it's about making friends and stuff.
Yeah, I think ultimately it opened my mind, so I don't sort of have regrets about it, but I do have some recollection of always being. It's just going to happen. You're going to be the new kid all the time and ostracized and kind of pointed at. And, that kind of thing. But, you got to get thick skin, I suppose, and it's better to get thick-skinned early than later, I think.
And also it helped you perhaps to make friends with different kinds of people pretty quickly.
I did. I kind of gravitate always towards the ones that were most like myself, I suppose, that had been a little bit transient themselves, generally. But sometimes, not always that case. Sometimes I'd find empathy with people that had been in the same town or, all of their 11 years.
So you came, where were you from in America?
Well, my mum
was
mum
Massachusetts,
and dad,
wasn't it?
Rhode Island actually, which is the next little state, but they're so close to each other. They're like, it's kind of like Albury and Wodonga sort of thing. Massachusetts and Rhode Island, they're right next to each other. And in our case, the biggest hospital where my mum could have all 7 kids was in Massachusetts, Fall River. So that's a little town across the border.
Have you ever written a song called Fall River? No. It just sounds like it's a song waiting.
Sounds like a Bruce Springsteen song.
It does.
Fall River was a big mill town. Went really kind of sour in probably the 70s. Became like kind of the headquarters for heroin addiction by the 70s and 80s, and probably crack after that. But
so Mum and Dad said, "Let's get out of here."
Well, no, we weren't in that town, but we were like in a 35 minutes away. But it was the nearest sort of sizable town. But it had back in the day, it was a big industrial kind of. Well, it had Oshkosh, B'gosh, and I think Levi's, and a lot of the mills were there that made all the garments. This is the golden kind of the cotton age of America. We lived in this little like potato farm kind of area. Only because I think my mum and dad wanted a bit of space. They were from New Bedford, Massachusetts.
And there was that's 9 of you?
Yes, 9 people. So they got a little cottage in this tiny little town. And it was all people with big families all around us, mostly Portuguese, like 9, 11 kids. That was pretty normal. So 7 was actually a small number. And, that was like a normal Norman Rockwell painting. Is how I describe it. If you know Norman Rockwell, he's an American painter. He made everything just look really nice. And to go back there now, it's pretty amazing because there's not many little towns like anywhere in America where McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts and things like that have not moved in. And this is the case. I think the council there must be actually really, really strong because there's plenty of it along the highway before you get off. But the actual town has been spared, which is very unusual.
Did it feel like you'd gone home?
It's like, well, the last time we went was the summertime, so you couldn't have seen it in a better light. Grass everywhere, just beautiful smells. And I thought, why did they leave? I just had that thing of like, this is a really nice little town. Off the freeway, close to, it's only like, I guess, an hour, maybe 2 hours to Boston at the most. Not that far from New York either. Like I've tried to imagine, like, if I would have stayed there, what would have been my trajectory? What I would have done. But it's silly. It's a silly exercise. But
there's no such thing as what if, is there?
No, there isn't.
You did or you didn't.
Yeah, that's right. You're very right. But it wasn't like they were escaping like some terrible, like, oh, we got to get out of here. If anything, it was probably a little bit sleepy, and my dad had a bit of excitement put into him when he was in the Navy. He travelled a little bit, and so he only had one brother. My mum was an only child, so the two of them kind of had this fantasy of like, let's have an adventure, let's do something with our lives, let's go somewhere.
When you're an itchy feet kind of person, even though you are in an idyllic setting, it's like, okay, this is perfect. We've got the most perfect kids in the world, being yourself and the rest of them. We've got perfect family, perfect, living arrangement. Okay, let's move.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I think my dad was a little bit restless, a little bit. He kind of, he grew up sort of being the dad because his dad wasn't around, and came from both my, parents had pretty rough sort of childhoods, alcoholism and whatnot. So yeah, I think they just they made their own little thing, and then they were like very much just like, let's do something, out of the box. And I think that kind of made it. My mum was a nurse and dad was electronics, sort of. They could go anywhere with those two kind of job skills. Ironically, they could go anywhere, but when we moved back to America after being in Australia for a while, they decided they were going to go to the West because they'd lived in Australia, and they were like, no way, we're not going back to shoveling snow.
Yeah.
So they went to Arizona, and, hot desert kind of place. We all sort of think it must have been because Dad thought, I'll get a little bit like Australia, and couldn't get a job, the whole time we were there, just unemployed. My mum got a job nursing, but it wasn't her first choice. She worked in the ER, I should say, which was in a town with like a really high crime rate, the highest in the whole Southwest, actually, which we didn't know when we moved there, but we found out afterwards. Like, oh, guess what? We're in the area that has the highest crime rate in the whole of the Southwest. Yeah, so every night she'd come, or sometimes early morning, she'd do night shifts and, come back and be just dealing with gunshot wounds and stabbings and whatever. And pretty full on. Yeah, don't need to watch the TV.
Correct. And hard.
Which we didn't have a TV either, which was good. I mean, at first it was horrible. I was like, what are we going to do? They've sold the TV.
How am I going to watch Batman?
Well, you know what I really was bummed out about? I couldn't watch the basketball because at that point I was really into like the NBA and Phoenix Suns were, the team. But got over that, just, go to the neighbour's house. But my dad started selling everything because he just wanted to move back to Australia so bad. He was missing Australia like terribly. So we sold the car, sold the TV, didn't sell the house. Yeah. So my mum and dad had started walking, everywhere. My dad had to walk my mum to work and, with an umbrella, and people would like heckle them, like shouting from their cars, like, you expecting rain? Be like, you've never seen someone walk with an umbrella before in the sun? Really? Yeah.
That's pretty adorable that your dad walked your mum with an umbrella.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that indicative of how you grew up?
He's a gentleman.
Yeah.
My dad is a gentleman. Was a gentleman. In my mind, always will be.
That's a beautiful thing to remember of your dad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, he was basically clinically depressed at that point, but he's still trying to do his best. But he was terribly like depressed. I mean, we didn't know that. We didn't go around, going, hey, Dad's depressed. No. But he was like, he needed probably some help.
I couldn't settle down either.
Yeah, and, it's just those moves that we, talked about, sometimes they just don't always go so well, But, I mean, I was having a decent time. I started playing cello at the local school, and it was a very unusual thing that the school had a cello, a string program, so being a public school.
Was that in America or here?
That was in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was only because the school was funded by a local farmer, mogul who had lots of illegal immigrants working on all his farms. So to keep the government off his back, he built hospitals and schools and everything, and fantastic facilities, like just money up the wazoo.
So it wasn't like everybody else's Australian teenage years for you, was it? Or you came back?
Yeah. And then
you had to fit back in again.
Yeah, to fit back in again. I started kind of getting into the landscape as far as like the musical landscape. Bands started seeing bands like Midnight Oil, Cold Chisel. Saw the end of the Cold Chisel thing, which was kind of one of the saddest things. It was like, hang on, you guys got to keep making more records. What are you doing?
And we were speaking of Arizona before, and that now makes sense. That last time you were in America, you went back to Arizona, did you? Or you went to a desert?
No, it was very similar. We went up to Santa Fe and Albuquerque, which looks
Who doesn't love Albuquerque?
Yeah.
The name and everything about it, Albuquerque.
No, it's beautiful up there. It's, high desert.
And there was lots of cactus and all that sort of stuff on your Instagram.
Just incredible, the colours. And I'm a big Georgia O'Keeffe fan. She's like one of the most amazing artists ever to walk this planet. And to go to her ranch where she worked and everything, it's just really, really amazing. I think we've got that in spades here, as well. There's so much like up the top of this country that every time, I don't get up there a lot, but when I do get up there, it's just blows my mind. It's just wow. I did a thing it was a big telethon for Channel 7 and charity thing, and my payoff was 3 days at this resort up at about an hour out of Broome, and it's just you are on the edge of like nothing. When I say nothing, but there is so much at the same time. It just looks like nothing, but every desert has got so many stories to tell, and the fact that it was an ocean at one point is amazing. It's humbling. Because you realise, as a country, we live in these little pockets along the coast, and we stay very close and safe and everything. And beyond, even just a couple of hours out of Adelaide, you are in the middle of you just got
things that'll kill you, mountains,
all of that.
And holes.
We're totally out of our comfort zone, and it's vast. It's like outer space or something. I love flying over it because about 2 hours into the flight from say Sydney to maybe about 2.5, yeah. When you stop seeing the little patterns of humans, roads and lines and things, then the patterns become natural. And they just look like beautiful indigenous paintings. And you fly over and you just go, wow. And they really do look like Aboriginal art. And you think, how do they get that perspective? And, it's pretty mind-blowing. It really kind of sends chills up my spine because you see it from that 30,000 feet and it just looks like everything they're painting on a myopic sort of level down on the ground.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us, Mark Lizotte Diesel. Make sure that you go and see any show that you can.
No worries.
Thanks, bye.
Cheers.